Debbie, and then I'll come back, to say that 3 years ago, I was giving a speech about the dangers of technology, the way technology was disconnecting us from ourselves. And I looked ahead at the future and dreamt of a day when we could create an app that would use technology to help us disconnect from technology and reconnect with ourselves and our own wisdom. I know it sounds paradoxical, but then truth is paradoxical. So a year ago, I thought to myself, I'm surrounded here with amazing engineers in the Huffington Post newsroom. Why don't we just make it happen? And because I'm very impatient, I wanted to do it really, really fast. So the best way to do good things fast is to collaborate with people who are already doing good things fast. So we collaborated with BeLife, which is a fantastic mobile health company, and with HeartMath, which has been pioneering research in the heart-brain connection. And lo and behold, last month at CES in Las Vegas, a perfect place to launch the GPS for the soul. And I want to tell you very quickly what it is. It's a free app. You can download it right now from the App Store, although don't, because you have to concentrate and listen to me. Because I don't believe in multitasking, incidentally. I think multitasking is one of the great ways we are cheating ourselves from being fully present. So what the GPS for the soul does is you put your finger on the sensor of your camera. It gives you a proxy for stress, your heart rate variability, and then you are able to course correct simply by launching a guide that you've created yourself or one of the existing guides that brings together the pictures, poetry, prayers, breathing exercises, yoga exercises, whatever it is that helps you get back into that place of peace, wisdom, strength, and serenity. It's based on two fundamental truths. The first is that we all have that place in us, and the second is that we spend most of our life not in that place. So the dream behind it is that it will help us course correct and basically keep getting back to that place again and again and again. So my partner in this has been Debbie Rozman, the CEO of HeartMath. So now I'd like to introduce Debbie to talk you through a little bit of the science and technology behind it. Debbie Rozman.
You can do the video?
Yeah, first we'll do a quick video, and then Debbie will explain more.
The destructive force of stress is everywhere in our lives. What's more, stress can feed off itself to create more stress, leading to a downward spiral of anxiety and negative emotions.
Did you know that technology you need to get back on course is already in your pocket or your purse? GPS for the soul takes several measures of your current stress levels, including your heart rate and heart rate variability, and then connects you with the things that help you course correct, from music and poetry to breathing exercises and pictures of your loved ones.
By connecting you with these things, the app in just a few seconds interrupts the downward stress spiral, puts things in perspective, and helps you remember all the things, great and small, that you can be grateful for.
Here's how it works. To start, gently place your finger over the lens and the flash of your iPhone camera. Our built-in sensor will gauge your stress level and determine whether you're stressed or calm. Next, start a guide to connect you with the things that help you course correct. Choose categories such as nature, start, breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, and experts. Or make your own guide that you can also share with friends. Add your own photos, quotes, music, any of the things that will help you find your center. Once the guide has launched, a breathing pacer will help you regulate your breathing. Your activity feed lets you see how your friends are feeling and what guides resonate with them.
GPS for the soul. Pause, interrupt the vicious cycle of stress, get back on course. Download the app for free today.
Thank you, Arianna. I wanted to give you a little history of how this all evolved and how HeartMath began. And for myself, a little background, I'm a 40-year committed meditator, and most of the people at HeartMath, 30 of us who helped Doc Childry found it in 1991, which is over 20 years ago, have been meditating 30 years or so, and we were all part of a consciousness group back in the mid-'80s. But my story was that I went to the University of Chicago to study attitude change theory in 1967. And it was all rats and statistics, and I just knew to change my behavior or attitude, it had something to do with the heart. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it, listening to my heart, following my heart, coming to California when Esalen was just getting started. But when I met Doc Childry, the founder of the Institute, and I heard his vision, which has been HeartMath's internal mission all along, and talking about heart intelligence and the intelligence of the heart, I really resonated. And he wanted to start an institute to really research what is this heart and how does it relate to the spiritual or the metaphorical heart. And so our inner mission has been to help people bring their physical, mental, and emotional systems into balanced alignment with their heart's intuitive guidance, heart intelligence. And this unfolds the steps to fulfillment through becoming who we truly are, heart-empowered individuals who choose the way of love, demonstrated through compassionate care for the well-being of others, ourselves, and planet Earth. This has been behind HeartMath. So then we got into the lab and we started researching. And we looked at EEG and ECG and galvanic spin response. And in 1991, when we founded the Institute of HeartMath to really see if we could map out these links between heart, brain, stress, and performance. We developed research-based trainings and technologies, very assessment-driven pre and post. And we've been in the trenches, actually, the last 7 years in schools, healthcare systems, corporations, finding out what worked to help people really reduce stress, improve performance, and measuring it. We've achieved significant ROI and healthcare cost reductions for our corporations between $500 and $1,000 per employee. So how did we do it? Where did we look? At one point, Doc Childry said from his own ponderance, he said, look at the spaces between the heartbeat. And we went, what? And that's where we looked at heart rate variability, the beat-to-beat changes in heart rate and the spaces between the heartbeat to see if we could find emotion or any connection between emotion and the heart, and the physical heart. And what we found in our research published in the American Journal of Cardiology is that indeed our stressful emotions, frustration, anxiety, worry, irritation, and any stressful emotion creates a really jagged pattern in the heart rate variability or heart rhythm. And we also found that, surprisingly, not surprising to anyone here, that genuine feelings of gratitude, care, love, compassion, appreciation created these beautiful harmonic sine wave-like ordered rhythms. And we realized through further research on how the heart talks to the brain from others as well as ourselves, that when the frustration and irritation occurs, that really it's inhibiting cortical function because our heart actually helps regulate the emotional response. It helps regulate the brain. There's more nerves going from the heart to brain, telling the brain what the body feels than the other way around. And that was revolutionary to make public, even because that means listening to our heart, following our heart, shifting to our heart really is affecting our brain. And as we activate love, care, compassion, appreciation, and get into this synchronized, coherent state, the thalamus, which synchronizes cortical function, the amygdala, whose core cells synchronize to the heart rhythm, they're all facilitated by compassion, by appreciation, by love, by the things we all intuitively know. So we then realized, okay, you're either out of sync or in sync. How do we make this simple so people get their heart and brain in sync? How do we provide them with simple tools, research-based and technologies? And we developed a whole series called the HeartMath System. Doc's mission was to, after some science, is to develop a system that the taxi cab driver can use with no dogma, no ritual needed, but a science-based system to activate the power and intelligence of the heart and help people live heart-based living and activate compassion and love. And as we developed these techniques, we did pre- and post-assessments. We worked in companies, 60% drop in depression, 40% drop in anxiety, huge drops in all of the stressful emotions, and then the health consequences of that within 6 to 9 weeks, and sustained for 6 months. Many sustained for 1 year because they started to listen to and follow their heart. These are our current key clients, and also Mayo and U.S. military and resilience building. So we've been really proving the system out and developing technologies. Some of you may have heard of our M-Wave technology, where you can see your own heart rhythms in real time change when you're frustrated, and then when you then become mindful, heartful with compassion, love, kindness. And we help people actually shift the baseline, reset their response to stress, and have more of this heart coherence in their baseline with the M-Wave desktop and the little portable handheld. You get in the green, that's when you're in coherence. So Arianna saw this, and then we started developing our own M-Wave iPhone app, which we're just launching this weekend here. And you come by our HeartMath booth, you can see it, where you get the full M-Wave experience there. But to scale this to millions, to take this to the world, to really be able to help the planet shift to the heart. There's an old Indian saying, the longest journey that a man or woman will ever take is the journey from head to heart. That's where our partnership with GPS for the Soul, to help people course correct, to give them a free app, a taste of what happens when they shift to their heart and see that change in their heart rate variability pattern. It's a passion that we share with Huffington Post, Be Live, and that we are so happy to be able to share that with you, because we feel when people can shift to love and care and compassion, empower their hearts, they are empowering their brain, they're empowering their executive decision, and they're helping to shift the planet. So thank you.
Thank you, sweetie. Thank you, Debbie. For me, one of the most important parts of the app is the breathing pacer that helps you concentrate on the rising and falling of your breath. So if you can just for 10 seconds right now, whether you want to close your eyes or keep them open, concentrate on the rising and falling of our breath and become in touch with the power that breathes us and the gratitude that fills me whenever I become in touch with that essence. I now try to do that regularly. I get alerts from my GPS every day, many times a day, and it takes seconds to actually get back into that place which every religion, every philosophy talks about, going back to my fellow Greek Archimedes, who said, give me a place to stand and I can move the world. Well, he was really referring to what is called as the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of goddess, if you prefer, the nirvana, that place that we all have experienced inside us. And the reason why I believe this is a very special moment in history, a kind of perfect storm, if you want, is because many different trends are coming together to create that moment when we look back, we will see how everything changed. And I want to talk very quickly, specifically about 3 trends. The first is the growing recognition that our world, to borrow something from the AA language, has become unmanageable. That we are basically going from crisis to crisis, whether you are focusing on politics, as I often do, and you are looking at what's happening in Washington, with a sequester about to happen, or basically one fiscal cliff after another crisis, so many of them manufactured, or whether you look at our healthcare system, 75% of our healthcare costs right now are for preventable chronic diseases, many of them connected with stress. And even if we had unlimited trillions of dollars, we would never be able to have a healthcare system that's working unless we get back to how we live our lives. or whether you look at the fact that in politics, in business, in media, we have brilliant leaders with very high IQs every day making terrible decisions. So clearly, what is missing is not IQ or Ivy League degrees. What is missing is wisdom. So how do we tap back into that wisdom? I must say, if I may speak for a minute to the women here, I think that we women have to lead the way to redefining what success is. Because I'm sorry, I'm so happy to see many men applauding, because it's going to be fantastic for you too. Because basically, you go into any corporation now and you see exhausted, sleep-deprived executives burning out, having a heart attack in their 50s or an ulcer, and somehow considering this a fair price for success. And the reason why I think women need to redefine success is because there is another way to do it. And we're beginning to do that. We're beginning to see that all the things that we're talking about now are not just touchy-feely, making us feel better. They are actually performance enhancement tools. At the Huffington Post, for example, we have 2 nap rooms. At the beginning, people were reluctant to use them. Now they're always booked. They realize the importance of having a quick nap in the middle of the afternoon and the difference it makes. Although I must say, the other day I was going by and there were 2 people coming out of the nap room. But my feeling is whatever it takes to recharge. Just don't tell HR, okay? And I have a kind of dream that when Hillary Clinton fainted and got a concussion and started talking in many of her interviews about how what she's looking forward to in her retirement is to become untired. That was the term she used. I thought maybe one of the things she can do is be part of this huge effort to actually show that we can be successful and effective in a different way. And incidentally, when we get to personal sustainability, we'll be able much easier to create a sustainable planet. The 2 things are connected, because if we are burning up and burning out, it's the same thing we're doing to the planet. So the second trend that is part of why I'm optimistic, part of this perfect storm, is the fact that all these things we're talking about here are now going mainstream. The Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, David Geddes is here from the Financial Times, who is actually writing a book on mindfulness and the impact it can have in business. Davos, I was in Davos at the World Economic Forum this year. It was amazing to see Mathieu Ricard, you know, a fabulous Buddhist monk, Mark Williams, professor of clinical psychology from Oxford, talking about meditation, talking about mindfulness, talking about compassion, teaching CEOs that this is a better way to go about it, that it's actually better for the bottom line. 25% of American corporations now are doing some form of mindfulness training, meditation, yoga, whether it's General Mills, Google, Aetna. So something is going on that is very important, very profound, and that we can help scale. And the third trend is, what are we in the media doing? We in the media are beginning to realize that we have a responsibility not only to focus on what is dysfunctional, not only to tell you every day what is not working, although that's incredibly important, but to also put the spotlight on what is working so that we can help it scale faster. So at the Huffington Post now, I have taken 18 of our sections and put them together under the theme of less stress, more living. So whatever section you're looking at, whether it is parents, we just launched a great club, the Less Stress Parenting Club, and 3,000 parents joined within days, with newsletters, with Every tool we can help parents get through parenting joyfully and effectively instead of being perpetually stressed and sleep deprived. Whether it's your wedding, why can't you have a wedding during which you are also present? I barely remember my wedding. I do actually remember my divorce. So we have, of course, a divorce section at the Huffington Post because we have 80 sections. You know, we try to cover every interest and passion. And it was actually, our divorce section was the brainchild of Nora Ephron, our editor-at-large, who said to me one morning, we must start a divorce section because marriage comes and goes, but divorce is forever. So our divorce section shows how you can get divorced and learn to co-parent with less stress, et cetera, et cetera. And all that, of course, leads to the GPS for the Soul app because it can help every day, multiple times a day, course correct when we fall off that place, that center that we all know we have. So let me just sum it all up very quickly by saying, because of all these trends coming together, we have an opportunity to have a critical mass that will fundamentally transform our world. And those of you who are here are already part of that critical mass. We don't know how many more need to be part of this growing movement before the critical mass spreads miraculously. But it is a truly magical moment. For me, critical mass is the scientific equivalent of grace. We do our part, and then grace takes over, and miracles happen way beyond what we are doing or what we're even capable of thinking is possible. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you. Wow. I'm just going to let the audience pause for a moment and digest some of what you just said. And then we can feed them some more. One of the things we try to do, which isn't so easy at conferences, is allow there to be awesome content, but then allow there to be occasional pauses so that the digestion element has an impact. And particularly when something very powerful is said, like you just said, I'm always reminded to pause so we can allow that to sink in.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you, Soren.
Welcome.
Thank you for creating this incredible vehicle for all of us to come together.
I do think there's something afoot in terms of why there's so many people here. We started out at 300, now we're at 1,600 or 1,700 in just a couple years. Huffington Post seems to be doing very well. Other kind of areas seem to be growing. And I'm wondering, considering all the different things in your life, you also have a blog, I think?
Yes.
That keeps you very busy. What was the motivation for doing GPS for the Soul? I mean, why add that on to the Imagine 100 Other Things that you also have under your wing?
Well, first of all, it's not just one of the 100 things. It's kind of very central to everything. And for me, even though I've been a meditator for many, many years and doing yoga, and there was a moment when all these things became much more intense and much more central in my life. And that was 5 years ago when I fainted from exhaustion and I hit my head on my desk. I broke my cheekbone. I got 4 stitches on my right eye. And that started me on my journey, not only to live my own life differently, but to make sure that I could use the vehicle that the Huffington Post had become to spread the message and to help people with tools to actually make sure that this becomes a sustained way of living differently.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know you had an experience when you ended up in the ER.
Yeah.
Because of your obsession with technology.
Yeah. We don't talk about that.
I'm sorry. I didn't know it was a secret.
No, see, I put it in my book, but unlike your blog, not many people read my book, so.
Well, I love researching, so I know all about you, Soren. We're on to you. So.
You have an expose section at Huffington Post, right?
Yeah. Multiple ones.
Yeah.
But also because the reason why I said that I think women have to take a leadership role here is because for many men, not the evolved men who are here, but for many men, for many men out there, sleep deprivation had become like a virility symbol. I mean, I was having dinner recently with a guy who bragged that he had only gotten 4 hours sleep the night before. And I thought to myself, I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, you know what, if you had gotten 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting.
And if you had meditated in the morning, how much more?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also the language. You know, the language of corporate America is often, we are killing it, we are crashing it. And of course, the endless sports metaphors. So again, we need to come up with a different language too, and to prove that in fact this is going to be better for the bottom line. I love the fact that athletes are now embracing this. The fact that as now part of tracking their diets and all the other things they do for Olympic athletes, they also provide them state-of-the-art nap rooms. The fact that they recognize the importance of sleep and meditation and all that, that's very new.
But how do you harness that? I mean, you have extraordinary responsibilities, and you're in a very, I would say, intense corporate environment. How do you manage being a part of that environment, but not just taking on the characteristics of that environment?
So, one of the things that happens by practicing this, and that's why I love that you are now calling Wisdom 2.0 a practice, because it is about a practice. It's like exercising a muscle, is that I get the feedback from my own life of how, not just how much more effective I am, but how much more joyful I am. And there came a moment in my life when it wasn't enough for me to be effective. I also wanted to enjoy what I was doing. I wanted to be grateful and remind myself of the opportunity that I have to make a difference. So I actually check on myself and how am I actually doing right now? And being present and being joyful is part of what I look at. Now, am I there all the time? Of course not. Nobody is, you know, we are on this planet. But the fact that's why GPS has been important to me, because I can literally put it on. I mean, my own guide, I have many guides. One of them is actually on the app, and you'll see it has pictures of my children when they were young and unproblematic. It has music, it has poetry, and what I love about it is that then I can go to Deepak Chopra's guide or to Mark Hyman's guide or to a friend's guide, and that also can have the same impact on me. And then you can share your guide with your friends. You don't have to make your guide public. Although I really would love to invite you all to make guides. And if you want to make them public, please send it to me. I'm going to give everybody my email address.
And these are, would you call these like doorways back into attunement or doorways back into balance?
Exactly, that's actually a great way.
You can use it if you want, sure.
Doorways into attunement is a perfect way to describe the guides.
Okay.
And also, Mark Williams, in his book that he was talking about in Davos, talks about how instant that can be. We've all had the experience of walking down the street feeling miserable, and suddenly we see a rainbow or a white kitten or something that connects us again to that part of ourselves where joy and gratitude reside. And also, I really believe that the key here also is going to be collaboration. And HuffPost, because it has over 50 million unique visitors and billions of page views, etc., has an opportunity to be a distribution platform for a lot of good things happening. And that's why we are creating this health hub, where already we have partners like Toktala, which is an Israeli startup that provides therapy sessions at a very reasonable rate. It's under like $9 instead of people having to go to therapies that they cannot afford. And so often we see all around us people just falling back on just drugs, psychotropic drugs, which is another disease here. We have 1 in 8 Americans on some form of psychotropic drug or other. Or Equilibrium, which is I think actually some of our friends from Equilibrium may be here this weekend, which is again a way to survey the latest research on how do you reconnect with your center. And we want to open up the Health Hub. Anybody here who has an app, who has a project, a group that's working in this area, please get in touch with me. My email is very simple, Arianna, with 1 R and 2 N's, @huffingtonpost.com, because we'd love to partner with you on this. What we want is to make it easy for people, not just to course correct quickly through the day, but then if they want to go deeper, to find out what are the sources of stress in their lives, to be able to have all the tools and the opportunities easily available for them to do so. And Soren, one more thing is that we talk about stress because everybody experiences stress, whether you are incredibly successful or whether you're out of work trying to make ends meet. There are different sources of stress. But you can also approach it from another doorway, which is creativity. Here we are in the valley, innovation. If you really want to be creative, just go read, Steve Jobs' biography by Walter Isaacson, in which Steve Jobs says how it was when he was in meditation that often a lot of his best ideas for Apple came to him. He calls it being able to listen to the whisperings. That otherwise we are really too busy. There's too much static in our lives to listen to them.
Beautiful.
And Bill Gates, he would have his what he called think weeks, when he would take a week off without any devices and go to a cabin and think. And again, to go back to another Greek, I always go back to the Greeks, who came up with his eureka moment in the bath. How often don't we have our most creative ideas in the shower or the bath?
So I'm curious, in your early life, was there some person that kind of instilled this within you, even though you might have forgot it later on and remembered it? Was there an aunt or a grandparent, or was there some human figure that touched you and that you felt this with?
Well, I was very lucky that it was my mother, who was entirely self-taught. And she, when I was 13, living in Athens, remember we were living in a one-room apartment, she had left my father because he was an endless philanderer, and when she complained, he said to her not to interfere in his private life. That's very Greek. I wouldn't suggest the guys here try that at home. It doesn't quite work. So she left with her 2 children, her 2 daughters. And she was doing yoga, she was meditating. When the Maharishi came to Athens in the 60s, she actually had me initiated. I was 13. And, but beyond that, she really was a source of unconditional loving. And she made me feel that I could go for my dreams, and if I failed, she wouldn't love me any less. I think that's the most important thing we can give children. She kept saying that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone to success. And the other thing that she did is she had absolutely no sense of hierarchy. For her, all people were the same. And a few years later, she was living with me in London, and I was dating a British member of parliament at the time. And he brought home the then prime minister for dinner, Ted Heath, and something went wrong in the kitchen, and there was a plumber. And my mother was in the kitchen. She was always in the kitchen cooking. And she asked the plumber what he thought of the prime minister. And the plumber said he didn't think much of him because he wasn't good for the working people. And so my mother said, hold on a second, let me go bring him here. So you can tell him directly. And for her, that was perfectly normal.
So you felt that like in your cells, the fact that she was had some inner practice.
Yes.
And was attuned to you.
But also that her life was a daily practice.
Yeah.
It wasn't just her time of meditating. Going to the farmer's market with her was a meditation. Because, first of all, she could not have an impersonal relationship. Marianne Williamson is here, and she knew my mother, so she can testify. You know, if you went shopping with her, she would make a connection with the shop assistant.
Yeah.
She couldn't just go through life unconsciously. She went through life very consciously.
Yeah.
And that, even though at the time it was a source of enormous irritation, because I wanted to just get from A to B, she was about the journey. And when she died, it was like another moment of truth for me. It was as though she was living life the way I believe life should be lived, therefore I didn't have to do it. But when she died, I realized that all the qualities that I had absorbed unconsciously through my life, I had to begin to manifest in my own life.
Yeah, beautiful. And how long ago is that
She died in 2000.
2000, so that was 12 years ago. Because I think a lot of people are on a path that if you ask them, are you aligned with this path? A lot of people would say no. The daily life and the pace and the stress that I live is actually not really aligned with what really matters to me. But getting off of that and reshifting is very challenging because the momentum in our culture is to do more, take on more, bypass everybody else that doesn't kind of reach our goal. So how do you see that shift happening? Because often it seems like some dramatic experience has to happen, some great pain, in order for that person to then look at what that rebalance is. What is your sense of that process?
Well, obviously, very often it is through a big wake-up moment, pain. But I feel that now we have the opportunity not to have to go through that. And I think that's why a conference like this is so important. That's why creating tribes is so important, where you have, even if it's just one other person in your life who is also on this journey.
Yeah. And
with whom you can share experiences, and also when you fall off, and we fall off multiple times a day, not to judge ourselves. I think that's terribly important. I feel very often we move immediately into judgment, and that simply locks it in. And I'm also fascinated by the fact that the science now is incontrovertible. This is not any longer just a matter of belief. This is absolutely scientifically proven. And to see, as more and more people want to take charge of their own health, again, that's another doorway. People want to be healthier. And there's no question that if we don't deal with stress, if we don't deal with the fact that we are not just our bodies, we are body, mind, and spirit. And we need to deal with all three if we're going to be truly healthy. And I love all the wearable devices. You know, I often wear my Nike Fuel Band or my Joe app to track how much walking I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. But I also feel we need to track how our minds and our spirits are doing, and that's where the GPS for the solar field can help us do that. It's not just one or the other. And you know, I sometimes find it very hard going, for example, into gyms, because people are suffering while working out. Do you see these faces that are like...
The gyms where they're all like,
like on
exercise suffering.
Exercise gym. And I like, can't we make exercising be joyful again? We can, and again, it's a matter of prioritizing, creating that kind of environment, because that's our time, right?
Yeah.
So why should we be suffering?
Right.
You know,
right.
again, going back to science, I was reading about gazelles. I love gazelles. You know, gazelles, when there is danger or something they have to deal with, they run fiercely, but then they stop running. And they relax. And we human beings cannot stop running. And we need to ask ourselves, you know, what are we running from? You know, this fight or flight has become such a big part of how we react to life that even when there is no danger, our mind makes up dangers.
Yeah.
I wrote a book in the 90s called The Fourth Instinct. You know, don't worry, nobody read it. It was one of my deeply unsuccessful books. But it was
Stepping stone.
What?
It was a stepping stone.
Yes, it was a stepping stone, yes. But I still I reissued it recently because the theme of the book is that the first three instincts that most biologists and psychologists talk about are survival or self-preservation, sex, and power. But if you look, you know, different biologists give them different names, but it comes down to these three. But if you look at human behavior, you cannot really make sense of it without a fourth instinct. And I deliberately gave it a very unsacred name, you know, just the fourth instinct, even though it's a sacred instinct, because it's the instinct that drives us to transcendence, to want meaning in our lives, to want our lives to be about something bigger than ourselves. And that instinct, I feel right now, at this moment, is coming more and more to the forefront. And people who ignore it are paying a heavy price.
Yeah.
It can take many, many forms. You know, you can follow it through art. You can follow it through healing. You can follow it through pain. You can follow it through love. I have, as I call them, many threads through the labyrinth. But if we don't follow it, if we just ignore it, then we are condemned to live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to pause. You had said that you see one of the roles of media in terms of supporting a greater consciousness. Often people look at media and they see it as what we're drawn to are the headlines that say something about a celebrity making some mistake or something about a catastrophe. You know, our minds go to that. And that in order to run a successful media company, you have to draw on people's fears, right? Like, oh shit, something just happened to somebody else. Maybe it could happen to me. You know, deadly virus happening. Is it happening to you too? The headlines, right? How do you balance that out as somebody who's a part of such a large media network, knowing that attention seems to go towards that fear-based thing, and it's less likely that attention goes to you know, something about love or compassion or wisdom don't have the catchy headlines that attract people. And so some people I know in media say, well, we have to present what grabs people's attention. So how do you balance that out with this kind of need in our culture for gossip and for these other things, and also this desire for giving them information that can be supportive and helpful and actually create the culture we want to create?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, I find that at HuffPost, we've gotten really good at having headlines which are playful, which attract attention. We've gotten very good at social, at making things viral. We've gotten very good at SEO. So now what I've told our editors, as we've grown and we now have 850 editors and reporters.
850?
Yes,
wow.
All around the world, because we are growing. You know, we've launched now in the UK, in Canada, in France, in Spain, in Italy. We're about to launch in Japan, Brazil, India. So as we are becoming a global company, what I tell everyone who works with us is that all the stuff that we've learned, we now need to apply to actually bringing people to see how they can live their lives in a better way and make the world better. So these things don't have to be boring. You know, they can actually be really exciting. We have a dedicated section called Good News section. It only has good news. It's one of our most popular sections. And I think part of it is because of the zeitgeist. You know, I really believe in the zeitgeist. I mean, I know it's a terrible German word, but there is such a thing as the zeitgeist. You know, the spirit of the times. The spirit of the times is changing.
Yeah.
And you see now many brands want to be part of wellness, for example. I mean, when I decided to launch the Huffington Post, it was an expensive operation. I wanted it to be free. I was absolutely committed to that. I didn't want anybody to have to pay for it because I wanted everybody to be able to access it. I never thought it would be sponsored. When we announced that we're going to launch it at CES, we had brands competing to sponsor it. It ended up being sponsored by Weight Watchers because of the connection between stress and weight. I really believe that if we set up in the media to do the right thing and do it effectively and do it smartly and do it in a way that draws people to it, not in a didactic way, the monetization will follow. And right now, every brand wants to identify with a good cause, for example. So one of the things that we are doing is we are creating sections for brands around their causes. For example, it started 2 years ago with Johnson & Johnson. Its cause is maternal well-being globally. So we launched a section for them called Global Motherhood, where everybody could tell their stories about how do you reduce maternal deaths at birth, et cetera, et cetera. And it's consistent every day, fresh content. They just renewed for another year. This is a way, it's transparently says, sponsored by Johnson & Johnson, but it's amazing now how many brands want to do that. To be able to let the world know what it is that they are doing that is good. And of course, our business section can cover Johnson & Johnson any way that they want to cover it. There's no, you know, there's a Chinese wall between these two areas.
The content that you produce and the content, that's great. And so I asked this question to Jeff Weiner actually yesterday, but it's a question that I really like to ask. So if you imagine yourself some years from now and you're on your deathbed and you're needing to say goodbye to Huffington Post, goodbye to your bank account, goodbye to your name, goodbye to kind of all the things of this world, what do you think will matter to you in that moment, and what kind of impact would you want to have felt that you've had?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I don't think life ends with death. So for me, at that moment, I'm not going to be thinking about my life. I'm not going to be thinking about my impact, let alone my legacy or anything like that. I hope that I will have been in a spiritual state to actually look ahead at that's next rather than what's behind me.
That's great.
And that requires daily practice too. You know, Socrates, I promise this is the last Greek I'm going to quote. Socrates said, practice death daily. He didn't mean that in a morbid sense. He meant that if we really consciously realize and remember every day that we're all going to die, then we live life differently. Because, first of all, we don't sweat the small stuff, and when it comes to death, everything is small stuff. It's the same thing, you know, that the Romans thought. You know, they would carve on statues and on trees, memento mori, remember death. Again, it's one of the things, we actually have now a dedicated reporter on the Huffington Post covering death. Because, again, that's, a huge silence in our culture. That the thing that is the absolutely inevitable part of our lives is not being covered by the media. The Columbia Journalism Review, His first name is Jalweed. If you can't remember his last name, he's doing amazing things around death in our religion section, which is next to our science section, because increasingly we're trying to see how the two are not opposed to each other. You know, dogmas may be opposed, but the heart of every religion is very connected to the heart of huge scientific discoveries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my point, to go back to death, is that if we make it part of life, it will make us lead life differently. And so when the time comes for us to die, we will be prepared for it.
Yeah, because we practiced it.
Because we'll have practiced it every day.
Yeah. So we just have a couple more minutes. I know if we had one thing that you wanted to pass on to this audience, and we're also streaming this, so there's a larger audience there. I'm sure you'd love for them to download GPS for the Soul and try it out, which they can do probably if they just do a Google search or an app.
Just go to the App Store and you can download it very easily.
Great.
And I would love to. We are actually constantly improving it. So I would love to get people. I mean, this is a great audience for me to get feedback from, how to make it better, share it, send me guides, etc. Yes, definitely.
Great. So they can do that. And then what is one other practice, if there is any, that you'd like to pass on? Remembering death is definitely an important one that you do, that you found helpful in terms of maintaining this balance amidst a very active life.
I really think it's the combination of two things, and these are such kind of elementary ancient wisdoms. The good thing is that there is nothing new in this area. And for me, it's the combination of some form of spiritual practice, some form of mindfulness, some form of meditation, whatever it is that works. I meditate every day. And some form of compassion practice. I think it's a combination of the two, as we are all finding out. It cannot be one or the other, because compassion is what keeps opening our heart. And it can't just be about our own spiritual practice. It has to be about passing it on, about sharing it. And I think the combination of the two, plus, and I think that's also incredibly important, not thinking we're going to do it perfectly. Because that's such a bane. Again, especially for women. We women are so hard on ourselves, harder than you guys, because we all have that voice in our head that judges us. You know, I call it the obnoxious roommate living in my head. But men have an easier time to kind of shut it up. Say, I'm going to watch a football game, go away. And we women have to wrestle it into the ground. So I think that maybe it's these two practices and the constant remembering to also love ourselves and be gentle with ourselves and not judge ourselves and accept that perfection is not of this world.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.